Okay, go to launch this on the way. Okay, so what I want to do is start with this stuff.
Yeah.
And then we can inquire about how much of that is in the Bible.
Okay.
We just kind of talk back and forth about, where we see it. We see it clearly Deuteronomy 18.
Yeah.
Where it just says no. Well, is there any evidence, I think it's fair to say, is there any evidence that was practiced? Like, what do they do in the cities? Like, what do normal people do? We don't have any evidence that they're going about divination on their own. Like, the possible difference could be the astrology. I was going to show them on the video.
Yeah, there seems to be an understanding that you have to be trained in order to figure it out.
That's right.
Yeah, so the issue of not doing it on their own isn't one of, we don't believe it, we don't think you should do it, whatever. They just recognize you need training.
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying, I'm not going to perform surgery on you when you get sick next week. It's not because I don't believe in surgery or think it works or whatever. It just requires training.
Right.
Is that the issue, do you think?
I think so. I think that there is no grid for them. Or what I would like to have is almost like put out a question, like for the viewing world. Like, hey, look, if you know of an instance where this is happening at a local level,
Yeah.
not even just local, like hoi polloi, like lay people.
Yeah. So not only have we democratized it, but we're untrained.
Yeah, but interestingly, following the exact same principles.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what I find so fascinating.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm gonna land pretty hard on that this is the same. And I like her mathematics stuff that she does here. Ula, thanks for your book.
Way to go, Ula.
All right, which thing? Correct that correctly here. All right, let's do this. Oh, we also need to make an announcement about the March thing in Dallas. End of March will be there, and that we're doing a couple other ones, some in Chicago, some in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Oh, that's for you.
Did it work on there?
Yeah, it's all lined up.
How is the new computer, by the way?
It's pretty fantastic.
It's pretty fancy schmancy.
It is. It's light. It's nice. I don't like that. Like it uses this USB thing only because I have to have this.
Huh.
Like it doesn't have HDMI or USB.
How are they going to sell you extra crap if they...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, let's do this thing.
All right. Welcome to the Pillar Podcast. I'm Eric Smith, the founder and president of the Pillar Seminary. Today I've got Scott Booth, our resident OT nerd who wants to talk about divination.
Yes. Okay, so...
Which I said that as though I'm making fun of it, but...
You also want to talk about divination.
Well, and there is a section of my dissertation about divination.
Right.
So
we should say that kind of what we're going to do today is not fully formed thoughts. Like there's, I don't know, how do I say this?
Well, you say that you don't have have it all as anally tied down as you would prefer.
All right, let's try this again. All right. So I should say that as Eric says, I don't have this all as anally tied down as I would prefer.
That is correct.
But since I'm getting so many angry emails and stuff on the Pillar Slack page from our students about not having a podcast, we haven't, that I've decided to go ahead and move forward with this one, even though some of the thoughts seem not quite ready, but we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
We do have actually 2 other podcasts recorded, but again, I don't like them. Like the sound is funny in one of them, and then like in the other one, I don't know what's bothering.
Okay, so here's the key. Please write to Scott and tell him we will endure the fuzzy sound. Just put the stupid thing out, please.
All right, look. Here's the thing. And then the last one, like it was a direct response to an email inquiry.
Yeah,
and we did it, and it was on I don't know.
Dan talked.
Yeah, Dan was talking. I don't remember what it was on the New Testament. Whatever. I'm not paying that much attention. Okay, so anyway,
my eyes were really dry.
That's right.
That day.
That's right. And speaking of Dan, he's doing the surgeries again. No, we shouldn't say that. No, take that off of the.
Dan.
Don't say it. Oh man, I'm gonna have to cut that out.
I know you are.
But I can't.
You
I don't want
always
to cut it
have
out
to
of
say.
YouTube.
Oh, you're not going to edit the video?
No.
Oh, no.
Oh man, maybe you won't watch it.
How are you going
Should
to
we
get
risk
through in a format where you can't edit the video?
I can. I just.
Well, you just don't want
I
to.
want to see what happens if I don't. I'm betting that Dan and my mom won't watch the videos. So in case we slip, we'll be okay.
Yeah, by we you mean you.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Okay. So let's get started talking about divination. We have in the past talked a little bit about it. I think in some Job stuff we did. We talked about Christian divination.
Yeah.
Here, I want to start by really talking about kind of honing in on divination, kind of principle, what is it, and talk about some specifics and how it worked. So divination, at least in like anthropological terms, is just the practice of trying to communicate with the divine, like in any way that you can. And way back to Cicero, there are these categories that are used, which now have like natural and artificial divination.
Right.
Where natural divination is essentially it requires no skill, no extra level of understanding in order to interpret what the divine is.
Yeah, the deity communicates directly.
Yeah, it just says, "Hey, Joe, go down the street."
Right.
And there's no like.
Or here's a dream.
Yeah.
That the deity communicates directly
Yeah.
to you in the dream.
And in the dream, it's not like a three-legged horse that's dancing on his nose underneath a new moon or something. You're like, what?
Yeah.
It's like the deity shows up in a dream and says, "Hey, Solomon, what do you want?"
Right.
Like that really easy stuff.
Right.
So that's natural divination. The artificial stuff requires training.
Right.
That's where you've got to have all these books that they would write in the ancient world. These scholars, they would be experts in these lists of how to interpret things. And my goodness, is there a ton of different ways to interpret, things to interpret, I guess. So
Right.
you can interpret the stars, you can interpret flocks of seagulls,
Yeah.
you can do what the patterns and, well, any kind of astral things. I should get back to that though. And you can do oil on water, smoke, you pull out livers,
Yep.
different, the heart, right? And then they have really cool diagrams that they make out of clay so that you know like what parts mean what and like really cool stuff.
Right.
So, although I should say that even on the astral divination stuff, they are not interested in the bizarre phenomenon like comet streaking across the sky as they are in like regular phenomenon.
Right.
Because theologically, what they want to know how things are wired and what's kind of wired into the world, the will of the gods being evident in the goings on of the world.
Right.
Right, and delivered to them by the gods, these secret formulas.
Right.
And yeah, we covered it so far pretty good.
Yeah, I just feel the need to point out the difference between laconomancy and alluromancy.
Oh, please do tell.
Well, laconomancy is when you have oil on water, but let's say you're all out of oil and you use flour instead.
Oh, that's true.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
I figured that was vital info that the listeners were waiting for.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Okay, so you've got all these in the artificial divination, stuff that requires training, right? You've got these lists. And you can look at these lists that they would generate. Like, for example, it'll say, if Venus wears a black crown, women will die with the child in their womb. If Venus is dimmed on her right side, women will have difficulty giving birth. If Venus is dimmed on her left side, women will have easy childbirth. So you can look at all these things. And I'm looking now at this book, Mesopotamian Divination Text, Conversing with the Gods, that my mom got me for Christmas. Thanks, Mom. By Ula.
I think didn't you shed a tear when you opened
I
this
nearly did.
package?
Just so excited to get back into this stuff. It's by Ula Suzanne, I don't know how to say it because she's from Denmark.
Yeah.
Koch
or something.
Cook, we don't know. Whatever.
Yeah.
K-O-C-H.
Sorry, Ula.
Yeah. So
And this is a follow-up volume, right? Because she
Right.
did a different volume in 1995, Mesopotamian Astrology, an introduction, blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
And
Right.
so
This is just like she's gone through and worked through and kind of categorized them and put them together, and you can see all the different ones. It's more of a collection of all of it,
right,
or a discussion about all the collections, I suppose.
Right.
Anyway, so
and since most of our livers, most of our listeners are looking for good bibliography, and since Dan's not here, because Dan's the one who always tells us all the books.
Right.
I will point out she has a 2000 volume, Babylonian Liver Omens, the chapters Manzanu, Padanu, and Pantakalti.
Yeah,
the Babylonian Ecstasy series, mainly from Ashurbanipal's library.
Hey, by the way, for you YouTubers, check this out. Here's
look at that.
Entrail models.
Wow, look at that. Isn't that crazy?
anyway.
Nice.
All right. Okay. That'll all like.
I bet you that's a volume Dan will never recommend on the podcast.
Okay, so you have these lists, and from these lists, you can actually start to figure out how kind of how divination works, the principles behind it, and she's got a really cool statement here that I would want to read what she says because I think it's really helpful. She says, on a very basic theoretical level, the divinatory techniques all worked alike. That is, the internal semiotic links between protasis and apodosis were similar in all genres. Any ominous object was associated either with us or with the enemy. Planets and stars were either hostile or friendly. Marks on the liver were either significant for us or for them. All kinds of phenomena formed part of a complicated web of such classification that permeated all types of divination. The changes or appearances of the phenomena were classified as either positive or negative. So, bright, big, white, healthy, normal, on time, or on the right side were generally favorable appearances, whereas dull, small, black, deformed, not on time, on the left side were generally unfavorable. So then she talks that essentially what you're getting here is kind of mathematical. So let's go back over the Venus ones I just said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Venus, you just have to know, is this astral aspect of the goddess Ishtar. It's a major female deity. So if Venus is wearing a black crown, meaning dimmed on the top, it's going to be bad.
Right.
If Venus is dimmed on the right side, the good side, then things are going to be bad. It says women will have difficulty giving birth. If Venus is dimmed on her left side, which is the bad side, so if the bad side gets taken away, women will have easy childbirth. Right. So what I want to say is there is kind of a general math involved. It's a general understanding, this thing is good for me, or this is a sign for me, this is a sign for my enemy.
Right.
If the positive side of the sign of my enemy is dimmed, that's going to be good for me, right? You can kind of understand how all the math on this works out.
Right. I feel like we should pause just for a second to say the presupposition behind all of this is that the gods in creation decided to communicate with people.
Yes.
And so what the scholars are doing is they're figuring out what's been communicated.
Or have been told by the gods.
Yeah, because I think, when you just hear what, they did rituals over a liver to determine what a god was saying, these people are stupid. Well, you got to cut them a little bit of slack because their presupposition is that the gods are using various natural means to communicate to people.
That's right. And yes, I was going to say that there's a theory that they kind of compiled all these occurrences, and then that this is all proven stuff. But she goes against that. She's like, no, because no king wants to be the experiment on whether he's going to live or die. What's going on here is the theology is leading the way. Right. So the positive and negative signs are already pre-wired, and then whatever happens. And then we know that in a sense because the scholars will write letters to the king and say, see, didn't we tell you? We told you that someone in your high court was going to die, and they did. Okay, so one of the things that I went and then looked for was, looked in scripture for places where this occurs. Not the specific people who would do this, because that's easy. That's Deuteronomy 18.
Right.
These are people who can figure out the will of the gods or the will of God by looking at these internal things or the stars or whatever. The list is Deuteronomy 18, like I said, and it's exhaustive and well, I guess it's not exhaustive, but it's extensive.
Yeah.
And God's really angry about it. So it's Deuteronomy 18:9. When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer or a charmer or a medium or a necromancer or one who inquires of the dead. For anyone who does these things is abomination to Yahweh.
Right.
And interestingly enough, he says, the only way I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to talk to you.
Right. That's exactly right.
You don't actually have to have special knowledge.
Right.
You're not going to hear what I say and go, wait a second, I don't understand.
Right.
He's just going to say something. So he says, I'm going to use prophecy where you can just understand what I'm saying.
Right.
Prophecy and dreams is what he works with. Okay, so I went looking for evidence that this kind of thinking, where it is in the Old Testament, right? This idea that people can just read the signs.
Right.
I couldn't find it. So any of you out there, if you know of this, I'd like to hear about it because it's such a basic principle.
Yeah. Be a little more specific. What you couldn't find is where people are doing it on their own without consulting a trained person.
Right. Like
You
in the
can
villages.
find the examples of the trained.
Oh, totally. You want to
Yeah.
find that, just go look at Manasseh.
Right.
2 Kings 21,
Right.
it says, and Manasseh reinstated, and it just lists all of these.
Right.
Right.
Saul going to the necromancer.
Right. This
Yeah.
this stuff totally happens. You can
Right.
see the Philistines behave this way.
Absolutely.
Like, it's normal. But to see non-professional, just lay folk out in the village and it says, look, all these guys got together and looked up at the stars and this is what they thought because they all could use this basic theory of interpretation
Mhm.
and just figure out what the divine will. Like, I don't have evidence of that. And I don't even have evidence of it archaeologically. I don't know how you would have it. But the closest thing I can think of is the knuckle bones, the Astrogali things, which
Yeah.
are, there you go, which even that, you could say that's part of divination, but it's used for other things as well, like ritually sealing a destruction layer or something like that. So I couldn't find evidence that it was amongst kind of the hoi polloi.
So archaeology is useless, is where.
Shut up, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that's so easy. All right. But the reason for it, for any, if you've got any ancient Near Eastern scholars listening, they're probably screaming, saying, of course you can, because this is secret knowledge.
Right.
This is protected knowledge.
Right.
And sometimes passed down from generation to generation. While yes, there is like a theology or a semiotics involved here, that it wasn't for everyone to do. It triggers profession.
Right.
It is your profession to do this. You have to, and even among the professions of divination, while they may have been aware of some of the specifics of, the guy reading the birds might be aware of some of the guy practices who reads the smoke, they're not experts in each other's fields. They're
Mhm.
experts in their little thing. So the expertise is required in order to perform the divination.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting because it kind of makes you wonder, how did these people know what the will of the gods was? Just like in the normal villages.
Mhm.
What did they do? Like, they would have had to consult something. And it's interesting to look at the way Deuteronomy, what it allows.
Right.
It allows prayer, supplication. You can go to priests. You can offer sacrifices. You can wait for a prophet. You can plead with the Lord, but you can't force the hand, essentially, by divination.
Yeah, so when you were referencing Deuteronomy 18, you made the comment that these things upset God. And it even says in the text, these are abominations.
Yeah, this is why I'm kicking them out.
Why is it so abominable?
I think it changes the locus of control, is what I think. Like if, essentially, Yahweh makes it so that he just talks to you and that you're dependent on him. You're dependent on him talking to you, his time and all this other stuff, when he sends a prophet. Divination allows you to go double check,
Right.
to go inquire on your own, even to figure out how to manipulate things, right? So like in the ancient world, yes, there's prophecy in Assyria and Babylon, but you could go confirm a prophecy, right, by means of divination, right?
Right.
God doesn't allow
you can avert a disaster
Yeah.
by specific rituals.
Yes, right. So that's the other huge part of divination is that these scholars would know, oh shoot, there's a bad thing on the horizon. Here's what we can do to avert disaster.
Right.
We can, if it's supposed to be on the third Monday after the new moon, tell you what, let's move the calendar. They would actually change the calendar.
Right.
They can do all kinds of really cool things.
There's supposed to be a big flood, so what we'll do is we'll go break a dike and
Right.
have a minor flood to take the place,
Right.
so that the disaster occurs.
Well, the
We
king's
just
going to
control it.
die.
Yeah.
So we'll crown a guy king.
This is my favorite. Yeah.
Crown a guy king for one day.
Yeah.
Kill him, and then the other king goes back up there. And they're like, job done.
Yeah.
Right? So
Exactly.
you see, essentially Ahab tries to do this at the end of 1 Kings when he's told that he's going to die. He puts his coat on Jehoshaphat. He's like, hey, Jehoshaphat, wear my Letterman jacket. It says Ahab on the back. You'll be super cool. And like he's thinking that the gods are going to kill, right? And a random arrow strikes Ahab. And
Yeah.
It's kind of a neat thing. So this led me to think about today, all this stuff about divination, right? And how does this stuff apply at all to today's world, right? Because in the ancient world, as we've been saying, you have these specialists who are trained to read and understand the signs. And they were outlawed. Don't go to these specialists.
Right.
Because you're not allowed to play in this.
Right.
You can't read the signs and know or figure out what I'm going to do. I will just talk to you.
Right.
The power doesn't lie in secret knowledge. The power is just I talk to you, just you and me. So if you think about the church today,
You should say, I talk to you through prophets.
through prophets, or sometimes directly,
Yeah.
right? But
And Deuteronomy 18 is
the prophets.
specifying the prophet.
Yes, that's right. That's right. But the rest of the text allows for the dreams as
Yeah.
well, and a couple interesting things about casting lots, which we'll have to get to another time.
Yeah.
Which seem to be generally speaking, they seem to operate among the same rule of non-specialized interpretation of what the gods are doing,
Right.
and it seems to be done in very special circumstances.
Right.
By sanctioned people in that case. But anyway, so you run that today, and you think of, well, how does that apply for today? And clearly, we shouldn't go to fortune tellers and astrologers
Right.
and read the stars to figure out what is going to happen to us,
Right.
or get tarot cards or Ouija boards or something, right?
Right.
Or communicate with the dead, And I think on the whole, the church is pretty good at that. I don't think there's a lot of churches that go around and say, listen guys, we're trying to figure out whether or not we should do this new building project or not. So would you each go and consult your local medium? I don't think that's a thing that happens.
Right.
However, now that I've crawled out of the academic hole and interacting more with the church, I am actually seeing a lot of the principles behind divination just democratized.
Yeah, by democratized, everybody kind of does it on their own. is what
Yeah,
I mean.
you don't need a specialist anymore.
Right.
You can now, because I guess you have the Holy Spirit, you can do it on your own. And essentially, there are, if you think about it, we're trying to figure out the will of God. And I've talked to people about it, and they'll say, well, this, and this went right, so I knew the Lord wanted it.
Right.
Like, that's the same as Venus having her bad side blotted out.
Right.
What's the difference there? I'm asking, is there a difference between the principle of divination that is in the ancient world a specialized practice, and what I see so common in the church is the Lord doesn't want us to do this because all the doors are closing?
Right.
What is there? I'm asking you seriously, is there a difference?
I don't think so. So here's the beginning, or not the beginning. Well, here's a section of Enuma Anu Enlil. Is it Enuma?
Yeah. When? Yeah. That's a case.
So this is a divinatory text, right?
Right.
When Anu Enlil. Notice when I said it first, I didn't say Anu. Yeah, you're welcome. When Anu, Enlil, and Ea, the great gods, created heaven and earth, they made manifest the signs, decided the places, and established the seats. They set the gods of the night and divided the paths. They drew their starry images, the constellations, night and day, month and year they made. Like, what this is telling you is that the stuff we're reading, the signs that we're reading, were set in place by the great gods at creation.
Yeah.
That logic is exactly the logic you're talking
Yeah,
about.
God is setting up these signs in the world for me to read.
Right. So I hit every red light on the way to work. God's upset at me today.
Yeah.
And then you go trying to figure out, why is he upset? Well, I didn't have my quiet time, or I was rude to my wife this morning. God's mad at me. He's against me.
Right.
You're reading signs. That's divination. That's what we talked about in the whatever podcast where we talked about Christian divination.
Right. Which is funny because when you look at what Jesus says, he's like, when you follow me, it's gonna kind of suck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, you're gonna have a ton of troubles.
Yeah.
And I mean, think about Paul on his way to Rome. Shipwreck. Should have gone home.
Mm.
Right? Like, all of the reasoning involved here is super dangerous.
Right.
I think. So then, what's the alternative?
Yeah. Well, the Paul example is a good example. If he was reading the signs, he'd have turned back. He wouldn't have gone on those journeys. God told him to go.
Yeah.
So he went.
Yeah. I think it's like the problem that we have today is essentially the same problem that you had in the Old Testament world, although we've compounded it because now everyone's a diviner,
Right.
right? But the problem is, I don't know what the Lord is saying.
Right.
Lord, would you talk to me?
Right.
Right? And the solution to that is you either wait for him to talk to you, and in the meantime, you pour over his word so that you can figure out what carrying his name looks like.
Right.
What does he expect out of you? You've got lots of stuff you should be doing. And when it comes to a particular decision that you're trying to make, you don't get to just read the signs.
Right.
And it may be that God is opening all these doors for you, but you got to ask him.
Right.
Like, you can't just say open doors, I can go, because that's divination.
Right.
That's the same principle that's involved here. I think that's where the church gets in trouble. And it's, like I said, some of the stuff is still forming in my head as I'm working through it. But it was funny as I was reading Mesopotamian divination stuff, that I'm like, wait a minute, I saw that at church. But we called it something different.
Yes.
Closed doors. And when, this is the other one. When God closes a door, he opens a window. Same thing, right? Or, maybe God is saying no, but if I do X, Y, and Z, then he'll say yes. Same stinking thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same principles.
Yeah, that's the modern version of
the ecstasy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I can change things. I can move things around.
It's a Nagburbu ritual.
Yeah.
Modern.
I can manipulate the outcome, right? And so it's fascinating that whether you're in Old Testament or New Testament, God's like, he lays out what he expects from you on a daily basis of what that should look like. And he says, sometimes I'll talk to you, and you can talk to me all the time. But you can't read the signs into it unless he says, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You read backwards on this stuff. Anyway. So anyway, that's what I've been working on. So there's your podcast.
Yeah, so just so we don't run the risk of leaving people feeling hopeless and floundering because now, well, I don't know what to do. So you pray about something, right? God doesn't say anything directly. What do you do?
Well, first of all, you keep seeking.
Yeah.
There's still stuff like there's still wisdom. There's still wise counsel. There's
Unpack wisdom because that's what I was trying to goad you to talk about.
Oh, were you? Which is fascinating because that's also creation theology.
Right.
But I think before we get to that, you, in all cases, you take stuff to the Lord, and interestingly, at least in churchy things, you do it in community.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So this isn't a solo gig.
Right.
So in the wisdom stuff, I think that there's also a resource for, in Proverbs and people in the church who have wisdom, say, look, how is this place, how has the Lord wired this place? And to seek into that because he's told you, it's in the text, it's amongst others, and say, this is the path to follow. And if he tells you not to, then don't.
Right.
Right? And you can always take it to him. You can always take it to a community.
Right. I guess the thing I'm trying to prevent is, I haven't heard from the Lord, so I'm just going to sit on my hands and do
no
nothing
action
for forever. Yeah.
No action.
That's not what we're saying should
I
be
think,
going on.
and I think the thing that I'm trying to encourage people is that if you know the Lord has said something, why does it matter how bad it gets after that? Like, seriously. At what point do you get to then say it's bad enough that now anyway, it doesn't make any sense to me. If he said it, then the conversation's over.
Yeah.
And then you just do it. And he also told you it was going to kind of stink when you do it.
Right.
Right? Which we should expect. So, anyway.
I gotta pee.
All right. Wait,
This
can we
video-
just finish?
What?
Can we just finish
I'm gonna
before-
pee my pants. It takes me 10
gotta-
seconds.
The bathroom is a minute away.
You gotta edit the video anyway. We already decided that.
We already decided. I'm leaving this in.
Are you?
Yes.
Then keep talking to the video.
Okay.
From the
All right, let's
podcast.
talk to the video.
Show them your little knuckle bone.
Oh, okay. I didn't show him.
But I thought you were gonna cut out that thing about Dan's surgery.
No, I'm leaving it in.
Oh, no.
Oh, so YouTubers, here's the little astragalus bone thing here. Look at that, pretty cool. I have two, but I can't figure out where the other one went. I hope that the cleaning staff didn't find it and toss it, because that would stink. Well, yeah. I think I can do fast forward on this stuff.
Were you sufficiently entertaining while I was gone?
I realized I can double speed the video through some of this. So I'm gonna,
So you've just been sitting there
Yeah.
staring at the camera?
yeah.
Nice.
So, mention the thing in Dallas, March 30th, at Watermark Church.
Okay.
We're gonna be at Watermark Church on March 30th.
Yeah,
And then
you just mentioned it.
you have to say it to the podcasters, though.
Oh, you say that. I do the outro thing,
Oh, okay.
which I need to find. Hold on just a second. Are we ready to outro?
Yeah, I'm ready. You ready?
Um,
Maybe we can cut it on. This is a long one. I didn't want it to be this long, but whatever.
all right, here we go. Oh crap, I was supposed to call someone at 2:15.
Oh, ready? All
right.
I'll do a thing. I'll do a little thing real quick here. Okay, so that was a little longer than I wanted, but whatever. There it is. A couple things to tell you. One, we're putting these up on the YouTubes now with much less editing. So, yeah, that'll be up there. Also, we're going to be at Watermark Church in Dallas on March 30th doing a workshop, training. I think we're going to do some prophecy stuff, which will be really fun. And we'll also be, I think we're going to do Houston and Chicago and Minneapolis. So yeah, just keep listening.
Are these things posted on our website somewhere?
Yes.
Where we're going to be or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but the dates for the Chicago, Minneapolis stuff isn't secured yet, or the
Okay.
Houston one. So, all right, that's it.
Cool. Well, as always, thanks for subscribing and sharing the podcast. And any thoughts, comments, different ties you want Scott to wear now that it's on video, email us at podcast@pillarseminary.org, and be sure and mention the fact that the sound quality you're so anal about, it's okay to release the. It's not like the whole thing is going in the background the
It's
entire
exactly
time.
like
Oh my
that.
gosh.
It's like Dan is in a cave shouting at us.
No matter where you live, you can hang out with Scott. There he is for an hour online. It's kind of ruined now if this is going on video, though, because now they already know what you look like. It's kind of scaring them off a little bit. But you can get a feel for what class is like by signing up for a preview at pillarseminary.org. And as always, we're dependent on the support for the scholarships. So help these pastors get trained and continue their training.
Word. All right, that's it.
That's it, I think.
All right, later.
That's it.